Yeah, so is there more chocolate chips coming? Is that what it is?
Open our hearts.
So let's just start with our foundation, our triad, where we have relationship. What is relationship? Is communication, which last week we had an idea on how we can connect a little bit more with communication. Check-ins, alchemy, throwing things out, bringing things into your relationship that you want, desires, fears, needs, to talk about, what is it that you want, or, hey, would you tell me something you want me to know, or would you tell me something you don't want me to know? And then we have intimacy, which is what creates all the difference between a romantic relationship and friendship. And then intimacy has these beautiful layers, right? We have these layers of, and we're going to kind of talk more about that. Bids for attention. What are the love language of my lover? And how can I respond more and be more responsive and aware of when he's giving it to me, or how could I give him also what he wants to receive? And then we have, our everyday reality, doing our kitchen work, doing our computer work, doing our kids' work, doing our this work, shopping, doing our whatever, and then that going into that space of sexuality, and where's that bridge, and like who starts that journey over the bridge? And most of the time there's non-verbal agreements between the two, and it's really good to just talk about it and just be like, hey, this is what I would like, or this is what, and set those kind of agreements, so to speak, that are totally fluid all the time, alive, but just so you kind of know what the other person's thinking, because often we don't even know what the other person thinks, and if we're both waiting for the other one to make a move and no one ever does, nothing's going to happen. And then when we cross that bridge and we both get on that, like, let's both get on this ride, yes, we're both saying yes now, we're committed, then once we're there, what do? Do we go into the regular, boom, boom, boom positions that we normally do, or is there something else we can do? And that's where the whole tools come in. So that's kind of how I see it, as sort of these three components of our deeper intimacy. Is that communication piece that needs to be there always, like if we're not communicating and open, we can't even go to the next step, right? So then there's that bridge. How do we gap that space between us into that sensual, space? And then the third piece is like, what do we actually do when we're there? Yeah? Mm-hmm. So we'll kind of like play with those pieces tonight and break that down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's an idea that I really like and have adopted when it comes to intimacy. We've heard of the term intercourse, and then a lot of people call foreplay like something that leads to intercourse. But the kind of challenge with that term is it implies that it is a piece of something else, that foreplay is leading to something else, instead of it being its own thing that can be all that it needs to be. And so I've since adopted the term outer course. So there's intercourse, but then there's outer course, which can just be massaging you, or gently touching your skin, and that in itself is connection, and it doesn't necessarily have to lead to something else. It's whole onto itself, but it might. And I found that distinction to be really helpful, because I've, as a male, tended to be very sensitive to not wanting to be like pushy sexually, and like really trying to not be that sleazy guy. And so then I've gone to the other extreme of like not really engaging in foreplay or initiation like at all. In the beginning of our relationship, you were the one always initiating, because I was just like really didn't want to push myself onto you. So but it's like you wanted it. So it was this interesting dynamic, and it's still constantly this evolving thing that I'm learning. So this is more of a discussion than like, here's a guru who knows everything. It's more of like,
yeah, we don't have all the
we
answers.
don't have all the
It's
answers.
just-
It's more of a conversation, and there's some distinctions that I've learned that have been helpful. And so that one of them is the idea of outer course, where now I can be like, oh, I'm not necessarily trying to get somewhere. It's just, we're just connecting, and it so happens to be outside of your body. And there's another kind of subtle distinction that I'm learning to balance with is, I just came up with a term for it today, which was expectationless desire. So let's say I have a desire and I want to connect with you sexually and have intercourse, and at the same time, it's like not wanting to be pushy and expecting something of you. And so there's a desire there, and so there's some kind of a drive to want to connect with you, and something that arouses in me, but there's no expectation. And then with the awareness of outer course, this is outer course, and this is whole unto itself, and it's just great that my desire has like driven me to connect with you physically a little bit more. And yeah, maybe you want to touch on what it's like on the other side of it, when it's like wanting to feel desire, but also not wanting to
be invaded.
Yeah, invaded.
Yeah, we're going to focus on the woman for a second, because as women, we know that when we're not feeling it, we're not feeling it. And you know that also, I don't know if you know that saying, but it's like, if a woman is happy, the man is happy. If the woman's happy, the family's happy, and the family's happy, the community's happy, and then the country's happy. Like, it sort of all boils down to the woman. Like,
happy wife, happy life.
Yeah, it really is. So, and then as a woman, we if we close off heart and yoni from fear and trauma, we're closing the door to that possibility of healing. We're the only ones who can open that door back up. So we have this male, this loving partner in life, who's coming and is like knocking. It's like, hey, let me in. Can I come in? And we can just be holding so much fear and tension that, and we don't even realize it. Like, so there's a lot of inner work we can do, and there's a lot of trust that can be cultivated in the partners. And this is where perhaps the tantric tools come in, or different tools that you can work with, where you can build that trust and that energy trust, so that the woman then opens and starts to feel her desire naturally rising up from within. Because really, ultimately, the power is in the woman's hands. So that's both a good and a bad thing, right? Like, to have that like responsibility of like, because if a man moves on to us and we're like, no, like it's a no, right? But if we say like it's a yes, then, and if he's not quite sure and we start moving on to him, he's most likely going to be a yes.
Yeah.
Unless there's some kind of issues going on there. A man can be ready in 2 minutes, whereas a woman can take up to like 45 minutes.
And so he found that one of the most predictable thing that we can measure and determine the success of a relationship in the long term is how frequently a partner responds to their partner's bids for attention. And so, like you mentioned earlier, like I basically had a bid for attention. Tamarah, well, I wasn't really bidding for attention, I was just coming up behind you, but in a sense, it is a bid for attention. It's, I'm coming and I'm hugging you and I'm touching you. And so, like you had mentioned earlier, love languages is like one way you can think of them, as my highest one is touch, so my bids for attention will often be touch-based. But they can be, words of affirmation, or they can be like talking and asking questions. And so when we become aware that in a relationship we're constantly making these bids, and we can choose to respond to them or not. And so like you've been very responsive lately, but there's been times where I would maybe come up to you like when you're doing the dishes or something, and it's like, in all practicality, it's not a convenient time, right? You're doing dishes, and so you're like, whatever, you keep doing dishes. You don't really respond. But lately, you would like stop and you would like receive it, and then that totally, I have a completely different experience of my bid for attention because you are receiving it. And so that brings up the concept of responsiveness. And I heard a podcast with John Gottman, and he was talking about responsiveness, and he said the most amazing example of responsiveness that he saw was when he went to Africa and they saw a lion and a lioness. And this lion was so responsive to the lioness. He was aware of her every subtle shift in emotion, and she would get up and he would get up, and then she would lay down and he would lay down. And then the van got a little bit too close to the lioness, and she started to get weary, and then the lion looks and he starts getting protective of the car, like he is aware of her and he's responding to her. And so responsiveness is one of the most powerful things, one of the most powerful tools, not even tools, it's a state of being, right? It's presence. And the more responsive and present and that we respond to our bids for attention in our relationship, we can completely transform a relationship in a moment through responsiveness. Like the example I brought up last time, where you just like felt my presence and responsiveness, and then you just like came and kissed me, and I was like, what just happened? Like, and the contrast of that is this kind of maybe mundane everyday life, like going through the motions of
I'm too busy.
Don't have time for this. Right?
Many times in the past. It's like, not now. I'm doing something.
Yeah.
Right?
And so that
Dishes. My hands are wet.
that brings up the conversation of commitment. And I kind of touched on it earlier, but as far as I see it, you could kind of frame it as there's like three levels of commitment. And in different areas of our lives at different times, we go through different phases in these three levels of commitment. And the first level is wanting, where we want something to change in our life, and that could be our health, or it could be in our relationship, or whatever area. There's something that's not the way we want it, and we want change, but we're not actively doing anything about it. And then the second layer is trying. So Yoda is like, do or do not, there is no try. Well, trying is level 2, where you're like kind of putting some effort in, but you're not fully committed to really making the change happen. And then level 3 is when you're committed and you're like, you know what, this is really important to me. Like, my relationship this is like the foundation of a huge part of my life, and I'm going to make something change in this. And then we commit, and then we see it through. It doesn't matter what challenges come up, we face the challenges and we make the change. And very few people commit to things in their lives, and when we find commitment within ourselves, like, mountains move. Mm-hmm. And it's powerful. And so a lot of times it's, in my experience, the lack of commitment is I don't know if dissociation is the right word, but maybe it is, because we're not fully associated to the consequences of non-commitment. Like, we don't really see, like, if I am not committing to my relationship, there are real impacts and consequences that are impacting my life, my partner's life, my family's life, and I'm not fully comprehending and taking in that, how much it is affecting us. And if I can associate to that, of not only the pain that I'm creating by not making an effort to make a change in my life, but also the pleasure of, like, how much better my relationship could be if I truly committed to being responsive to you, to being present, and to, facing the pain that I have, and to have the conversations that are really scary, and, whatever comes up, like, if I am committed to seeing it through, like, that will make a change. Mm-hmm. And so I think finding that commitment in ourselves is really the first step, because without that, if we're just wanting, our partner to change, and we're not making a change, like, chicken or the egg, who's going to go first? Someone has to. And I hope, ideally both partners are fully committed, but there's only so much influence that we have.
This brings me to that thing we talked about when we have been in a relationship for so many years, and then we're kind of used to our partner being a certain way, and then we kind of expect them that way. And we were talking about that.
Yeah. So last week we spoke on the term transfiguration, which is a tantric term. There's actually also the kind of scientific side, which is called the Pygmalion effect, or the Rosenthal effect, which is basically people live into the expectations we have of them, either positive or negative. And so they did this study where they had these children, and they told the students, or they told the teachers, that a certain portion of the students were really great students and another portion were not so great. Turns out they were, it was kind of random selection, but those students turned out to have significantly better grades and everything because the teachers expected that of them. They saw them as the good students, they saw them as the bad students, and they literally lived into those expectations. And so in our relationships, we do the same thing. With every person, our children, people will live into either the positive or negative expectations. And so like you said, we develop self-images, so we have expectations of ourselves, but then we also develop images and stories around our partners that limit them. And maybe they want to change, but we may be contributing to them not changing because we are expecting them to be who they were in the past. And so again, that's where responsiveness and presence comes in, where if we can just be and see and experience beyond stories, then we are not holding on to the past.
Huge shift at some point in my life, I don't know if it was my late 20s, I think it was my late 20s, when I suddenly realized that when I was in the act of sex with another, I was completely cutting off from like my goddess self. Like, up until that point in my life, it was like kind of this like kind of more trauma based, or this more like, I don't know, this weird fantasy that was super twisted, and suddenly like I started to like call on these new parts of myself, and I think that was like transfiguration with myself. Like I started to see like, oh, I am a divine goddess, or like a sex goddess, or like whatever it is I wanted to call myself, to perceive myself in a new way sexually, and then like shine a new light on myself in that area. And so yeah, that I feel that actually really has started shifting. And if you follow Tony Robbins, I know you do, that's about identity. And it's because like with believing who we are and how we come into life, with everything in life, including sex, we show up with, this is who I think I am. And like if I'm anxiety, then I'm bringing anxiety, instead of just like I'm all these things, and now I'm gonna put on my sex goddess and just be right in her, and I can choose that right now, and just let it be, and and let all the stories drop away, and of course, all that said, there's lots of healing to be done and lots of shadows to look at. Yeah. I'm all these other things too. It's like, yeah, I know, we all are those things. We all have victim, prostitute, saboteur, child, wounded child. We all have those archetypes, every single human being. And once you know that those two words, beliefs are, I'm not enough and I'm not loved. We all know that about each one of us. And it's okay. We all have that. Okay, now we're on the equal playing field. Now let's all just like enjoy, and let's just see how lovable we can be, right? So there's been a big phase in our life where I was super disconnected sexually, right? We had like a few years where I was just like, our relationship started off with me being very sexual, and then we had kids, and it was like big break, like 0 down to 0, nothing, nada. 9 months almost of like 0 sex. And then I had to heal, and since I don't think I told the story I don't think that you heard, but the vagina as well as the lingam are both reflexology organs. What that means is the foot, the hand, the ears are all, when you press them and you massage them, they actually
encompass or contain each organ system.
Yeah, the main core of the body, all the organs, you can access them and harmonize and find balance by pressing feet, hands, and ears. The same with our sexual organs. Exactly the same. Inside of our yoni and lingam. So just for ease, you know, because yoni is inside and lingam's outside, but they're the exact same picture. When you put it like this together, they line up exactly. So just for ease,
like
we'll
for
use
example,
lingam.
The tip of the lingam is
heart,
pineal gland, but then heart.
Yeah, glands, heart, lungs, spleen, stomach, liver, kidneys.
And so when you think of like
there's other ones
when
too. So when it's
a woman's
fully
very
inserted
open,
into a vagina, she's lines up exactly the same. Her heart
and
with
the
his
cervix.
heart, their kidneys together. It's like magic.
I just want to mention one thing
Yeah.
about the cervix, because the heart reflex points are at the tip of the penis and the cervix, and so if a woman is fully open and the man can go all the way in and massage the cervix, that is very heart opening. And for one, it's like you're fully trusting, right? That you're letting the man all the way in, but those are also the reflex points that are being activated.
So we all want to get there, right? We all want that. But unfortunately, we can't jump from being in the kitchen and being on a computer to, oh, my cervix and his tip of penis is connected, and we're in our sex healing mode and completely blissed out on our orgasmal cocktail of like hormones releasing endorphins and like free drugs. Okay, so how do we get there? How do we get there, right? So it really is. You don't even need to do the shamanic work anymore. It's like it's right here in front of us. It's your partner. It's like our window into enlightenment. So hi, women. It's kind of up to us. It really is. And the man need not give up. And the man needs to continue fighting and showing her that he wants her, even when she's going to test him to the max and be hard to get. And I'm kind of, just saying these words right now to be kind of fun. But it's kind of true, The woman will play a little bit of how much, show me what you got for me, And at the same time, she might be like, I'm, no, this is too vulnerable. You're going too fast. No, my body's shutting down. Because she wants to be in control. So there's this dance that needs to be entered. And the woman must be there saying, yes, I choose to go into the dance with you. And until she chooses that, it's sort of, there's no game happening. It's just going to be nothing. So we've had many times, it's so much easier if I'm turned on. So if I do my own self-work, if I do my Nia, my jade egg, my self-massage, my whatever it is, singing, whatever it is that lights me up in life and I feel good, and then I turn on my sex goddess archetype and I say she's alive, I'm going to choose to be her, how can I either please my God or take what I want, right? And then there's this whole and then the rest is easy. So if I'm turned on, it's easy, and I can give a quick example of that today. That's what happened today. But there was a big chunk of years when I was off, big switch off, and it was I was waiting for him to do something, and then starting to resent him, starting to think I'm just gonna sweep sex under the carpet, pretend it doesn't exist. And starting to fantasize, am I not gonna ever have sex again? Right? There was this whole time in our life. There was that gap of time where I was just and that's when I got on this journey, guys. That was my big pain, right? Of I don't want to live like this forever. And so then I started doing my self work, the jade egg practices, breast massages, yoni gazing, so much stuff. Telling myself in the mirror, I love you, I forgive myself, doing anger releases, all kinds of stuff to release and come back to me and truly love and accept my body, so that when I can go into the sex act with my partner, I can show up fully, and I'm not like coming in with all my insecurities and, oh, this is what I'm bringing all my like shame and embarrassment, try to love me. No, it's like, no, I'm like I'm there, right? Because he's just like, I want to love you, like, let me love you, right? So, but you know, you've also done that where I was totally off, and he would like give me like an hour-long massage and check in with me and like, does this still feel good? And then like, you know, maybe start licking my nipples and, oh, does this still feel good? And then like moving down to my pelvis, does this still feel good? And like, there's been times where like felt like my switch was off, but he was so slow and gentle and sensual that then like we eventually did totally go into this beautiful lovemaking, all just from his initiation. Mm-hmm. But it took much longer because I was off. Yeah. Whereas when I'm on, this morning, for example, I was like, okay, Nia, okay, how much time do we have? It was like things happen quickly. And so he was a little discombobulated. He was a bit off. But I know when he's off, I'm like, which tool am I going to take out of my toolbox? I kind of get excited. I'm like, the goddess will like rise up and like fix this situation quickly. And it was just so fun and easy. And it's fun to be in that power position too, right? Yeah. So then maybe I'll just quickly share what we did, just to give a show of like, this is what, for example, we did this morning when he felt disconnected. And I felt good. I felt okay. I wasn't like super like woo on. I was just like, I felt good. Do you want to quickly give a quick example? So we sat down. We put a show on for the kids because we're like, they need to be, you know. And we did quick relationship alchemy. We threw out stuff. We threw out all this overthinking. I kept doing that like about 10 times. And then we brought in some things we wanted. And then I could just tell by how he looked.
But what was coming up for me was we were trying to get the kids to like play so that we could have time, and
right.
They were, I don't know what was happening. They were just like fighting or something. And then what was coming up for me was something around not being lovable, or like you not wanting me or something. And then I don't know if you picked up on that or you just intuitively were like, okay, lay down. And then I actually had a release because like I felt deeply loved, because you came and just like gave me all this attention. So it was actually really appropriate that you were.
And I think that's just being tuned in to your needs, right?
Responsive.
Just responsive. Exactly. Like, I feel like you just need to receive, you know, and I haven't done this for you for a long time. Like pre-kids, you know, we were always giving each other massages and like doing these tantric practices. And then after kids, it's like, we have no time.
And it's like, you know, being a mother and giving a lot.
Exactly.
I know intellectually that you don't have a lot to give. And so I, you know, try to massage you and give. And at the same time, I'm giving. I'm like, intellectually, I don't expect it, but then emotionally, over time, I want to feel like that you want me. Yeah. And then it's sometimes that was a rut that we would get into of like, you would challenge me, I would challenge you, like, do you want me? Like, are you going to do a move? Am I going to do a move?
Like, okay, now we're together, now what are we going to do? We're both going to do practice together, like the sex to heart breathing. One of the there's chakra breathing, which I also really love. There's the 3 dance hand breathing.
I think what even precedes microcosmic orbit is the idea of delaying orgasm.
Yeah.
For me, probably my 2 personal biggest motivators are energy loss. When I ejaculate, there's a significant loss of energy, and I didn't really realize it until I started to be more attuned to my energetic self, and realizing that it would take me about 2 days to fully recover energetically after ejaculating. There are some exceptions to like specific breathing energy, but that's the exception. So breathing up the energy and withholding from ejaculating allows me to conserve my energy, and even if I want, focus it into intention and healing my body or manifesting or whatever it is. And so that's one reason, but then also, like you mentioned, extended orgasm, it allows us to connect for a longer period of time, because it's not just like peak and gone. And so we can cultivate a lot more intimacy and go places that like deep, like trans-dimensional places that we would never go if we didn't have that time to connect, cultivate the energy, and ride the waves. And the Tamarah, she was giving kind of an example of a graph where what kind of the usual path is energy climbs, and it's like, oh, it feels so good, and then you just climax, and then the energy drops. Like,
So
not peaking.
So we're kind of jumping ahead and around a little bit, but like I think what we're trying to get to is that ultimately, if we imagine we're entering a healing session, very different thought process than, oh, you know, like, I don't know, are we gonna have sex or not? Right? There's this sort of like, is this sex? Is this not sex? What does this mean?
Less pressure.
Yes, for me, it's completely shifted how I think about sex. When I think of it as a healing session. Okay, think about a massage for a second. You go get a massage. What are they doing? They're touching your entire body. Okay? And it makes you feel better. Like, how is that different from being intimate with your lover? It's your whole body, and it's inside your core channel, which is massaging all your reflex zones, which is relaxing all the organs, up to the pineal gland in the brain. Like, that's the ultimate massage. So if we enter this space, this very sacred place where we can receive healing, and that sexual energy is our creative, potent life energy that can human being, what are we going to do with that sexual energy? So this is a whole other way to look at sex, right? Now it's becoming this healing ritual instead of this sort of like bang bang, you know, like, I don't know, get it over with, or whatever it is. So men lose a lot of energy through ejaculating, whereas women lose their energy in menstruation. But during the rest of our cycle, when we're not bleeding, if we are doing our Sagetic practices, or just breathing or dancing, moving energy, breathing energy up, or during sex or during self-pleasure, then you're letting your sexual energy rise up instead of it all kind of just sitting down here and then leaking out during your moon time. Because moon time energy moves down, but the rest of the time you can let it move up. So that's basically that's the tantric path. The tantric path is, how can I use sex to super consciousness? How can I use this to like open up my brain, just like you would ayahuasca or marijuana or whatever. Use these things, like you use the sexual energy, which is already within your gonads, your ovaries, your testes, bring up here to expand your consciousness. And I feel like I have felt it. I have already felt the effects in the last years of my life, going from like not really having orgasms or having like clitoral orgasm and peaking the first X amount of years of my life to like now where I'm like, I actually try not to peak. It's always like a bit of a, like, sometimes a little bit hard. I'm like, okay, no, I'm not gonna go there. Because when I peak, then the pleasure goes high, and then drops, just like a man. Like, I feel that in my body. I peak and I go down. I can still keep going, like, you know, I don't like lose my erection, right? But I can keep going. But the pleasure has lessened. Mm-hmm. Whereas if I don't peak with my, like, the clitoral orgasm, and I keep going, then it's more like, instead of it going, it's more like, and then stay and hang out.
The energy rises, and then we breathe. And we
you
slow
actually
down.
literally stop. You don't penetrate. You just kind of hold there.
Yeah,
and
we
then
stop, slow
move
down.
Again, dance.
And
then
let the energy rise.
Hang out again.
And then we stop.
You can imagine there's like an infinity symbol, breathing, doing the microcosmic orbit, or the sex to heart breathing, or just hanging out, humming, whatever you want to do. Let's move again. And then
we'll go through that cycle quite a few times before we get to a place where it's like lust has kind of subsided.
That's right.
And then now we can
it becomes infinite. And so all that said, there's so many things we could share with you guys tonight. So I'm wondering if we want to share like a simple energy practice. The sex to heart, the woman exhales from her heart. She's yang. Her breasts are coming out. Man is yin, then he's yang, sexual energy. So that breath is like. So we just kind of jumped in. No. And it helps to visualize. Like, so you want to use your imagination as much as possible. Like, you might imagine like sparkly. I like to imagine sexual energy as pink, but you can imagine it as whatever you want.
And it depends. I tend to be more kinesthetic. Like I'll feel it in my heart. I'll feel my heart expanding, receiving, feeling, exhaling.
Passing it to his heart. So this is something is great to do to start to connect the energy bodies, our auras, our chakras.
To ease into that connection. Because you could be fully clothed and you're just breathing, but in the very fact of being aware of our sexual and energetic bodies, we're starting to bridge that gap.
And there's another one very similar to that, and it's the 3 down breath. So it's figure 8. So if you imagine there's a center point right here, and it loops around my pelvis.
Like an infinity.
And then it comes around his pelvis. And it comes back to my pelvis. And we start to exchange the energy from our pelvises to our pelvis. From his pelvis to my pelvis. And on this one, you just exhale when you come out. So he'll exhale. You can sound, you just make it like naturally like in your body. And you do that for as long as you feel, and then at some point you'll lift it to the heart, and then you'll do the same thing. Very different energy in the heart than it is in the pelvis. The pelvis is more like dense. The heart is loving energy, and then you can bring it up and mesh your intellects together. So this is all about this receiving energy and giving. Just a dance, letting your energies dance, and then you always drop back down heart. I'm not breathing. And then you drop down.